Well, as I've already said, it's a pleasure to have the cooks back. We last had them on January 29th. And if you missed Sunday school this morning, you missed a wonderful lesson. And have a real connection with the cooks. We have that Elohim connection. Because of that, with that here. And it's great to have you here. And may the Lord use you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Before we actually get into God's Word this morning, let's go to the Lord in prayer. Father, you are amazing, and your love is amazing. Thank you that we have your Word, and we have this opportunity to gather to worship you. Work in our hearts this day to draw us closer to yourself. Conform us more to the image of Christ. Lord, be pleased to speak through me, that I might bless your holy name, that I might handle your word correctly, and that your people would be encouraged. I ask this in Christ's name. Amen. This morning's sermon is not going to be your typical Mother's Day sermon. But I am not typical. I was going to say I'm not your typical mother, but I'm not a mother at all, so I don't make a whole lot of difference. But Scripture does say to give honor where honor is due. So I have to ask all of those of you who are moms, if you would please raise your hand. Okay, let's give them a round of applause. You ladies are very important to the work of God. I, for one, know for certain that without my mother, I would not be here. Yeah. And at times, she probably wishes I wasn't. But I will start with the moms as a point of illustration, as long as you moms don't mind. Even if you do mind. So let's say that you have a child that you dearly love. And of course, when they were younger, they loved to crawl up into your lap and just spend time with you. You'd read them books or sing them songs. You would do things together. And as I got older, things began to change. Especially as you managed to get older and they grew up and stepped out of the house on their own. And now they come back and they take care of the lawn and they make sure the snow is shoveled. And they make sure that things are taken care of around the house. That things that are mechanical need to be repaired. They warn you about, internet scams and phone scams and all that other stuff, but they don't actually spend time with you. But wouldn't that make you feel kind of sad? I mean, you love them, you want to be with them, and you're grateful for all they do, but something's missing. Something's missing. Now imagine a church where you've got a group of individuals who really seem like they're on fire for the Lord. They've got programs and activities for the believer. They're involved in the community, helping the young believer. They deal with false teachers and doctrinal issues. And they have done really well at holding to the truth and sharing the word of truth with others. There's even been persecution, false accusations against them. The world doesn't like their intolerance of others or the stand that they've made for righteousness. And all these things, this group of believers has continued to move forward because of what they expect God will do and has done through them. And doesn't that sound like a great church? But what if I told you this church is very much like the child who does all of these wonderful things for mom, doesn't really spend time with mom? In fact, this type of church that's so busy with all the programs and activities is on the verge of disaster and doesn't even know it. In fact, that very church is illustrated for us here in Revelation chapter 2. Ed has already been kind enough to read through that. We read responsibly through Revelation chapter 2. I'm not going to bother to read through it all again. fact, they're commended. I mean, Jesus starts right out, verse 2, I know your works. Okay? Now, you've got to follow the list here. We've got to say that. I know your works, your labor. So it's not even been easy. It's been difficult stuff at times that they've been involved in. They've put energy into this. Your patience, because, boy, sometimes it has been difficult working with other people. You cannot bear those who are evil. Now, we've taken a stand for righteousness. We know what is right. That church has taken a stand. But not only that, you've tested those who say they're apostles that are not. You've found that they're false. They know the truth. They know what should be the truth. They know what should be taught as the truth. They take a stand for righteousness. This is really good. So it continues on verse 3, and you have persevered and have patience, have labored for my name. So it appears, even though there is a repeat of words here, the labor, the patience, in this case, the perseverance kind of leans toward the idea that their labor and patience has to do with the fact that they're under some sort of persecution. That people have banded together against them. And even in the midst of that, they have persevered. They have continued to hold true. They labor. They're patient with those who mock them and ridicule them. And best of all, that you've done this for my name's sake and have not become weary. Just like the child. Always there, mowing the lawn, raking the leaves, shoveling the snow, taking care of household items, warning you of evil stuff on the internet and the TV and the phones, and all of this stuff. And yet, listen to what Jesus says in the very next verse. Verse 4. Nevertheless, I have this against you. You've left your first love. You left your first love. Imagine, you've got this child who's doing all these wonderful things for you, never actually spends time with you. Never just comes in for a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. Just sits down and reminisces or talks about how things are, just sharing life together. It doesn't happen. Very much like this church. They've got all these activities for the Lord. They're standing for, but and you go, okay, so how do you make the jump from their leaving their first love to not actually spending time? Well, it's not that far of a jump, really. Let's say that we back up, usually how this has worked out, at least in my case. Charlotte, I've been married for 31 years. She's put up with me that long. They're ready to put her in the record for saints. Because of our relationship, we have 4 wonderful children. It's because we spent time together. Charlotte and I had some intimate relations, and as a result, these children were produced. But it's because we spent time together. Our love prompted us to spend this time together. We still spend time together because we love each other. That's what love does. What would you say about someone's love? They profusely tell you that they love you, never spend any time with you. So here we have the church in Ephesus. They got all this stuff. They left their first love. That first love winds up taking us back to what we know to be the first and greatest commandment of all, to love the Lord your God. Because many people think that a church that loved God would be described as a church that has all these activities going for them. But it's not. So if you'll turn with me to Matthew chapter 22. I probably should have warned you, we will be going back to the book of Revelation. We're going to be looking at Matthew chapter 22, verses 36 through 40. So Matthew chapter 22, beginning verse 36 says, Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law? And Jesus said to him, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment, and the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments hang all the law and the prophets. The great first and great commandment is love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. And if you wind up reading from Mark chapter 12, you come up with and all your strength. The idea is here, love has to do more with just being busy. Because in Revelation chapter 2, with the church at Ephesus, there was busyness. They had the activities. They were busy for the Lord and doing things. But being busy and doing things doesn't mean that you really love. For example, one of the groups that were around during Jesus' day that was highly involved with things and very busy and stood for truth and righteousness, even persecuted for their stand at times, but always putting an emphasis on truth, was a group that you would call the Pharisees. They were active, they were busy, they held to what they thought was true, and yet it's this very group that Jesus says, these people draw near to me with their lips, they draw near to me with their mouth, they honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. Jesus is looking for more than just activity. He wants our heart. He wants us to really connect with Him, to have a relationship with Him. It's not that the doing is bad, because you'll notice in Ephesians chapter 2, Jesus doesn't condemn the church at Ephesus for all the stuff that they're doing. It's not that that was bad stuff. The problem was they had left what they originally had. The love that they had for God. Now we talked about this in Sunday school a little bit, according to Romans chapter 5, verse 5, that the love of God has been poured into our hearts by the Holy Spirit that's been given to us. Usually with that there's a connection that's made to God. There's a relationship that's established. It's not about the busyness. It's not about the doing. Not that that isn't important. That all does come later, because unfortunately, obedience is a necessity. If you love me, you'll keep my commandments. The problem is when we wind up getting the cart before the horse, obeying the commandments is a result of love. And it is not love itself. Jesus says, if you love, you will keep my commandments. But is it possible to keep commandments and not love? Yep. Pharisees. That was that group. They kept the law, even to the point where the Apostle Paul himself said that according to the law he was righteous, blameless before the law. He kept it. Didn't know Christ. Didn't have a true relationship with God. So it's not about the busyness. That will come. It's important. But God wants more than He wants. He wants our heart. He wants us to have a real relationship with Him. So let's say, just for example, that it's my anniversary. It's not, but it's coming. So let's say it's my anniversary, and I wind up getting a bouquet of flowers for Charlotte. And so I come through the door, and I present her with this bouquet, and she says, "Oh, honey, you shouldn't have. These are so beautiful. Thank you so much." And I respond, "You're welcome. I'm just doing my duty." You laugh. Does that sound ridiculous? The whole idea of what our anniversary stands for has just been annihilated by me doing it because of duty, because it was my responsibility, because it's what I should do as a husband, right? I should honor my wife on her anniversary. What if, instead of that, I come through the door with this bouquet of flowers and, "Oh, you should have," and I say, "I can't think of anything that I would rather do on this day than to spend it with you because I love you." That's the difference between obedience for God and a heart of love. One is drawn because of relationship. The other one does things out of a sense of responsibility and duty. God doesn't want us doing things just because we're required to, just because He told us to. The Pharisees had that one down really well. He doesn't want any more of that. He wants somebody who's got a heart of love, a heart of devotion, a desire to actually be with Him, to spend time with Him. And so somebody like me might ask the question, do you love God? Fortunately, there are wiser men than myself out there, and so at this point I'd like to quote something for you from John Piper. He's the head of Desiring God Ministries, used to be the pastor at Bethlehem Baptist Church in Minneapolis, Minnesota. John Piper says this: do you love God? No one loves God perfectly in this life. That is not the question. We all know there can be a real uniting love with a wife or a husband or mother or father or dear friend without that love being perfect. In fact, the greater and more authentic the love, the more keenly it feels its own imperfections. The question is not about perfection. The question is God your treasure? Jesus said, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. That is, there will your love be. He was trying to persuade us to have our treasure in heaven, not on earth. He was calling us to treasure God above all things. Because what you count as your treasure is what your heart embraces and loves. So, do you love God means, is He your treasure? Is God the most valuable reality in your life? Is God the most valuable reality in your life? The second commandment that Jesus says, you add on to this, is like the first, is love your neighbor as yourself. There's this connection that Jesus says it's unbreakable. You can't have one without the other. In fact, you can't have one without the other. If you say that you love God and hate your brother, there's a problem. Because how can you say that you love God whom you haven't seen, and yet you can't love your brother whom you have seen? That's from 1 John chapter 4, verses 19 and 20. The idea is you can't say that you love God and hate the person who was made in the very image of God who's standing right there next to you. The two don't mesh. If you say you love God, you must of necessity love others. You put the two together, and you wind up with what God calls the greatest commandments. Love God, love others. And it appears this is something that the Ephesians missed. But if you go back to Revelation chapter 2, in verse 4, he says, nevertheless, I have this against you. You've left your first love. But I want you to see something, because we talk about the works, and those are important. But in verse 5, he says, remember therefore from where you have fallen, repent and do the first works, or else I will come to you quickly and remove your lampstand from its place, unless you repent. There is a connection of works to love, because you can't say that you love and not do something. Love of necessity implies that you will do something. I mean, as John would say in 1 John, how can you say that you love your brother and you don't give them the things that they need? You can't. You must give. And that's what God does. God so loved that He gave His one and only Son.
Amen.
So with the love comes a doing. There must be a giving of ourselves. So He says, you've left your first love. Remember from where you've fallen. Repent and do the first works. You mean all the stuff that they were involved in really wasn't where they started? Yeah. It's not that it was bad stuff, but it wasn't the most important. So, what I'd like you to do, we're going to take a look at the early church because I think they're a great example. If you'll turn to Acts chapter 2. What was it that the early church was originally involved in? Did they have all these programs? No, they didn't have all the programs. Still young. They were still growing, still had things to do, but there were things that they considered to be important. And you can find that in Acts chapter 2, starting in verse 42. So Acts chapter 2, verse 42 says, and they continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine, fellowship, and the breaking of bread, and of prayers, and they came, then fear came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were done through the apostles. Now all who believed were together and had all things in common. And they sold their possessions and goods and divided them among all as anyone had need. And so, continuing daily with one accord in the temple and breaking bread from house to house, they ate their food with gladness and simplicity of heart, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to the church daily those who were being saved. Now notice, there was something they were committed to. Verse 42, they continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine, fellowship, breaking of bread, prayers. I don't have time to go through all four of those in detail, but let's see kind of how this works out. So, fear came upon all. Verse 44, now all the believers were together and had all things in common. They sold their possessions and goods and divided them among as anyone had need. Now, do you find that incredible? These people have such a love for others that their possessions really don't matter anymore. To the point where they're willing to sell their property in order to provide for the needs of others because the people were more important than the things. So you start off, what's the very first work? Well, based on their love for each other, their first work is to make people and relationships more important than possessions. And it continues on. They sold her to verse 46, and so continuing daily with one accord in the temple. So they spend time, how often? Daily in the temple, and breaking bread from house to house. So you've got this ongoing relational thing where together they gather for worship, and they spend time together in each other's homes. I find this amazing. There's real relationship going on here. They're not getting together just once a week, kind of like this. They don't get together here and then leave and that's it. Their relationship is such they actually spent time together on a regular basis, daily, at the temple and house to house, wherever you can get together. We're going to meet. We love to be together. Well, they continued temple, breaking bread house to house, and they ate their food with gladness and simplicity of heart, praising God. What they had at the very beginning in the early church was real relationship, where people were more important than things. And that, if you look at Scripture, can only come if something else exists. Love for God. Their love for God drove them to love others, to want to be together, to spend time together, because they cherish people more important than things. And this is where things get difficult. Sorry. So please hold on. I have to ask some questions. Don't answer them out loud. How much time do you spend with God outside of church gatherings? So you come together on a Sunday, then you open your Bible, you pray, you sing. And Tuesdays you have prayer meeting, right? So you maybe come on Tuesday. How much time, don't answer out loud, but how much time do you actually spend with God apart from those two meetings? I mean, do you have a regular time that you actually spend with God? And do you actually spend that time with God because you can't wait to spend that time with God? Because you cherish that time with God? How about relationships with others? Is your love for God and others so important that you can't wait to spend time with other believers? Or do you just get together on Sundays and Tuesdays? Is that the only time you spend together? I mean, are relationships so important to you that you can't help but get together with people? Even if it's just a call. I don't have time to come over, but I wanted to call you and let you know how things are going. Just like moms on Mother's Day, how many of you moms expect a call from a child today? How many of you expect your child to drop in? Yeah, some of you already have it. That's really nice. Imagine Mother's Day without that. No phone call, no visit. Imagine a church so busy it doesn't spend time with God. God isn't interested in our busyness. He isn't interested in our activities. It's not that those aren't important, but those are secondary issues. Set those aside. How much do you love God? Is He your treasure? Do you really long to spend time with Him? and other believers, do you really love them? To the point where you're willing to give up all kinds of other things, to give up your time and yourself and your possessions in order to meet any need, just to be with them. This is the kind of thing that God wants for His church, that we would really genuinely love each other and Him. So this was written to the church at Ephesus. So I think it's only appropriate that we end from the book of Ephesus. I can't even say it. Ephesians. Go from Ephesus to Ephesians. There's a connection there. The very last verse that the Apostle Paul writes to the Ephesians, in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 24. It's interesting. This is the church the Lord rebukes because they left their first love. And the very last thing the Apostle Paul writes to them is this: grace be with all those who love our Lord Jesus Christ in sincerity. Amen. Let's pray. Oh, Father, grant us hearts that truly would desire, that would hold you as our highest treasure, and hearts that would long to spend time with each other, to share the love together that you have shared with us through Christ. And may that love that we share impact a watching world around us, that through it we might have opportunity to share with others that great love that you have shared with us through Christ. For it's in His name that we pray. Amen.
Take your hymnal with me. Turn to hymn 166. 166. I'll allow you to stay seated and sing reflectively.
Thank you.
through his word today. Say amen.
Amen.
Good to have the cooks with us today. While we sing this final song, if you would go to the back so our people could greet you and get to know you a little, that would be great. Let's stand together. Hymn number 221. We'll sing the first verse.